We're doing great. From a retail standpoint, there's a lot of retailing that happens on a per capita basis here in Asheville compared to our peer group. So here you have Raleigh on one side, all the way down to Black Mountain. And you may say to me, Joe, Asheville's doing so great because there's tourists that they come up there for the Blue Ridge Parkway, they come up to go to the Biltmore Estate, and this is all true. So that, to some extent, is a tourist bump. You see that also happening in Wilmington. But where that supposition falls apart is look at Black Mountain over here. Black Mountain has the Blue Ridge Parkway, all of the parks that we have, the Biltmore Estate. It has all of those things. The difference between Black Mountain and Asheville is downtown. And it's the value of that urban core as something that we all enjoy in the community, but it's also something we realize that tourists enjoy as well, and they spend a great deal of money in our community. So this is something that when we look at the value of downtown, we have to bear in mind that the downtown is a huge generator for this county. When you look at it across the state and you put the data up I have here the retail sales per capita as well as the restaurant sales per capita. So in the light colored bar is the retail, and it's actually the numbers that you see there you should multiply times 10. But I wanted both bars to fit on the screen. The darker color is the restaurant sales. So here's Asheville at about basically $29,000 per person in retail sales, and in Asheville, and then about $5,000 per person in restaurant sales. We're basically cleaning the clock of everybody in the state on the restaurants, way off the chart. And we all know this. I mean, there's 17 sushi restaurants in Asheville, maybe more. There's a lot of restaurants in this town, and that adds to the vital tourism economy that we have as well. From a retailing standpoint, we're also leading the state. Now you look at the state average over here, this is all of us, folks that live here in Asheville, and probably about our spending, maybe about maybe a little bit more than that, considering that we have more opportunities to go out than any of these other municipalities. But still, probably not much more, maybe 1 1/3 times this bar that goes across here. All of these municipalities have a Walmart, all of them have a regional mall, all of them have grocery stores. So that's what's happening in the average. It's what's above the average that makes us different. And that's something we need to support, engender, and have more of in this community. So it's that value of the planning in our community, it's the value of how we manage our city, has returns in our taxation and retail sales, as well as thinking of the city as a growth tool. And if you use the thinking of gross domestic products, in all of these cities that are across the state having their own gross domestic product, Asheville's at about $13.5 billion is a metropolitan area of gross domestic product. When you add up 13 cities from Charlotte down to Goldsboro, so Charlotte being the biggest, Goldsboro being the smallest, these 13 cities produce 83% of the state's total gross domestic product. So from a standpoint of wealth created in the state, the urban centers produce 83% of the economy across the state. And it's something to bear in mind when we have conversations about cities as the value of cities and how they return to the region. Asheville's pretty much holding down the whole western part of the state. The closest one to us is the Hickory-Lenore-Morganton cluster. And as we all know, that's not one monoculture city. Those are 3 different cities that have to be added up to be even close to what Asheville is. And they're about $12.3 billion in annual gross domestic product. When you look at the detail of the value of the real estate in Asheville, I mean, this is something that we've all talked about on the Issues Committee, and I want to give credit to Dwight Butner for pointing this out. You have a lot of churches, a lot of institutions. Downtown's suffer the burden of being in the core for the whole region for a lot of nonprofit entities, which is true, but it's also true of all of the cities across the sample pool. So Asheville has about 66% of its central business district actually produces real estate taxation. The other 34% is the churches, the government buildings, the things that don't pay taxes. But we're not the loser in the group. The loser would be Concord, that only has 34% of its real estate in its central business district in production. Someone like the city of Raleigh has state buildings in addition to their county and state city offices. So Raleigh's at around 53% of production. So we're doing better than the average. The average is about 57% across the sample pool. We're at 66%. But of that 66%, we have a tremendous amount of value in those real estate acreages that are producing taxes. So the average value is about $2.3 million per acre of those properties that are paying taxes, which is huge. There should be a trend line I've drawn here of how it should precipitously drop as you go down in population. We have an outlier of Chapel Hill over here because Chapel Hill has restrained its central business district and not allowed it to spread out. Now, a lot of that's because they're pinched in by a university. They're also probably one of the more sophisticated zoning and planning procedures in the state as well. Their central business district is about the size of the Haywood Street and Battery Park area. It's not a large area, so that by maintaining that, you get a higher value per acre. Our central business district goes all the way out to the Volvo dealership, where Patton Avenue and I-240 meet, and all the way over to the tunnel from 240, well south of the Orange Peel down toward the hospital. So there's a lot of area that really is, for all intent and purposes, fallow surface parking lots, or not exactly the highest and best use of that property. So we're doing great by comparative. I kind of think of Wilmington as a good peer group. So if you look at Wilmington's at about $900,000, let's say $930,000 an acre. We're at $2.3 million an acre. We're functioning better than Winston-Salem, probably between Winston-Salem and Greensboro. So we're acting like a much bigger city than we are, and I think we all realize that. That's a very metropolitan community. It also means that we're incredibly efficient. On a small area of land, we're able to get a high value return in our community.